Have you ever noticed that the more stimulation you get, the harder it becomes to enjoy simple things? Ban scrolling social media for hours, watching endless videos, constant notifications, junk food, gaming, even checking your phone every few minutes. And then suddenly regular life starts feeling boring. Your motivation drops, your focus disappears. You feel mentally tired, even when you haven't done anything physically exhausting. What's happening inside your brain? Man, the answer is dopamine. Dopamine is one of the most powerful neurochemicals in the human brain. Most people think dopamine is just about pleasure, but that's not actually true. Dopamine is mainly about motivation, drive, craving, and pursuit. It's the molecule that pushes you to seek rewards. Balinas. And in the modern world, your dopamine system is constantly being overstimulated. Manist. The good news is that your brain can reset. And in this video, we'll talk about what dopamine really is, why modern habits destroy motivation, how overstimulation changes your brain, and most importantly, how to reset your dopamine system naturally and effectively. Let's begin. And to understand how to reset dopamine, you first need to understand what dopamine actually does. Most people associate dopamine with pleasure. But neuroscientists now understand that dopamine is more closely tied to anticipation and motivation than pure enjoyment. In simple terms, dopamine is the signal that tells your brain, this is important, go get more of it. Banjust. Every time you expect a reward, dopamine rises. Samadhiyant. That reward could be, food, likes on social media, gambling, and video games, shopping, pornography, sugar, velanin, or even checking your notifications. Now, the problem is not dopamine itself. Dopamine is essential for a healthy, productive, meaningful life. Temiance, without dopamine, you lose motivation, you struggle to focus, you feel emotionally flat, you procrastinate more, you stop pursuing goals. Healthy dopamine helps you learn new skills, exercise consistently, build relationships, stay disciplined, achieve long-term success. The real problem happens when dopamine spikes become too frequent and too intense. Bondast, because your brain is always trying to maintain balance. And when you repeatedly overload the reward system, your baseline dopamine level starts to drop. Debandus. That's when ordinary life begins to feel dull. Think about how humans lived for thousands of years. Men's rewards were difficult to obtain. You had to work for food. You had to move your body. You had to build relationships in person. You had to struggle before receiving rewards. Now compare that to modern technology. Mange. Today, your brain can receive massive dopamine spikes instantly. Within seconds, you can access, infinite entertainment, endless scrolling, hyper-processed foods, constant novelty, fast emotional stimulation. Your brain was never designed for this level of non-stop reward. Every swipe, every notification, every short video gives your brain a tiny hit of dopamine. Manja. And here's the dangerous part, the more often dopamine spikes artificially, the lower your sensitivity becomes. This is called downregulation. Your brain reduces the responsiveness of dopamine receptors. Planding meaning unilice. The same activity produces less satisfaction over time. Bend. Dry. That's why, one video becomes 10 minutes becomes 3 hours, one notification becomes compulsive checking. The brain adapts. And eventually, normal life can't compete. Sembedian, simple activities like reading, studying, exercising, deep conversations, working on goals, start feeling harder. Not because you're lazy, blend, but because your reward system has been conditioned to expect constant stimulation. Manjas. This is one of the biggest hidden reasons people struggle with focus and motivation today. One of the most important things to understand is this. High dopamine activities are not automatically bad. The issue is uncontrolled frequency. Your brain operates through contrast. If your dopamine level is constantly elevated, your baseline emotional state drops afterward. BAMDA. This creates a cycle. You seek a cycle. You seek stimulation. Dopamine spikes, dopamine crashes, motivation drops. You seek more stimulation. And the cycle repeats. And this is why many people feel, mentally exhausted, emotionally numb, unmotivated, restless, distracted, even when they're consuming more entertainment than ever before. The modern world confuses stimulation with happiness, but stimulation and fulfillment are not the same thing. Real fulfillment often comes from effort, exercise, learning, building, creating, solving problems, helping people. And these activities usually produce slower dopamine increases, but they create something much more powerful. Sustainable motivation. The brain actually rewards effort differently than instant gratification. Balanges. When you learn to enjoy effort itself, your dopamine system becomes healthier and more stable. That's one of the key principles behind resetting dopamine. Now let's clear up a common misunderstanding. Bindia dopamine reset does not mean eliminating dopamine. That would be impossible. Dopamine is necessary for survival. Damdi, a real dopamine reset, means reducing excessive stimulation long enough for your brain's reward system to rebalance. Amendi, it's about restoring sensitivity, so that normal life becomes enjoyable again. The goal is not to feel less. The goal is to regain control. When your dopamine system stabilizes, focus improves, motivation increases, energy becomes more consistent. Simple things feel rewarding again. You become less impulsive. And perhaps most importantly, you stop needing constant stimulation just to feel okay. This is why many people report major improvements after reducing, social media, junk food, excessive gaming, constant multitasking, endless scrolling. Their brains begin to recalibrate. Now, let's talk about practical steps. These are science-based behaviors that can help restore healthier dopamine function. Reduce constant digital stimulation. This is one of the most powerful changes you can make. You don't necessarily need to delete all technology, but you do need to reduce compulsive use. But start by creating periods of intentional boredom, no scrolling, no music, no notifications, no constant entertainment. At first, this feels uncomfortable. That discomfort is important. Your brain has become accustomed to non-stop stimulation. When you remove it, your nervous system begins recalibrating. Over time, your attention span improves. MUD and simple activities become easier. Again, stop layering dopamine. Many people stack multiple sources of stimulation at once. For example, eating junk food while watching videos, listening to music while scrolling social media, gaming while chatting online. This creates extremely high dopamine peaks. Trupam, Tams. Instead, try doing one thing at a time, eat without screens, walk without your phone, work without multitasking. Trains Planet. This trains the brain, to become more sensitive to ordinary experiences. Shendi-sen. Prioritize effort-based rewards. One of the healthiest ways to regulate dopamine is through effort. Exercise is a perfect example. Plamdian Baline. The interesting thing about exercise is that it often feels difficult at first, Jane. But afterward, dopamine and other neurochemicals increase in a healthier, more sustainable way. Cold exposure, learning new skills, deep work, and challenging tasks can produce similar effects. The key is this, the brain rewards pursuit and effort, not just instant pleasure. When you repeatedly engage in effort-based activities, your dopamine system becomes more resilient. Improve sleep. Sleep has a massive effect on dopamine regulation. Poor sleep reduces motivation, attention, mood, and impulse control. Many people try to solve low motivation with more stimulation. But often the real issue is recovery. Consistent sleep helps restore healthy neural function. Omendia, a few important habits, get morning sunlight exposure, avoid bright light late at night, maintain light, maintain a regular sleep schedule, reduce late night scrolling, your brain repairs and recalibrates during sleep. Beans, never underestimate its impact. Akawu. Learn to tolerate boredom. Right? This may be the most important skill of all. Modern technology has made boredom feel unacceptable, but boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is often the gateway to creativity, focus, and deep thinking. When you constantly escape boredom through stimulation, your brain loses the ability to sustain attention. Delend people with strong focus are not necessarily smarter. Many have simply trained their brains to tolerate low stimulation long enough to enter deep concentration. And that ability has become incredibly rare. One major mistake people make is trying to completely eliminate all pleasure from life. That's not sustainable. And it usually backfires. The goal is not extreme deprivation. The goal is balance and intentionality. Man's healthy dopamine comes from, meaningful goals, human connection, physical movement, learning, creativity, purposeful work. You don't need to become a monk. Melons plamau. You simply need to stop living in a constant state of overstimulation. Planned. Because when the brain is overloaded every day, motivation naturally declines. And when you reduce unnecessary stimulation, the brain gradually regains sensitivity. That's when life starts feeling vivid again. Your dopamine system shapes motivation, focus, discipline, mood, energy, and even your ability to enjoy life. The modern world is designed to capture your attention and maximize stimulation. Millions, but your brain pays the price. The good news is that neuroplasticity works both ways. Just as the brain can adapt to overstimulation, it can also recover. When you reduce compulsive stimulation and prioritize effort-based rewards, your nervous system begins to rebalance. And over time, focus returns, motivation increases, energy stabilizes, and simple moments become enjoyable again. The goal is not to eliminate dopamine. The goal is to stop letting artificial stimulation control your behavior, because real fulfillment doesn't come from endless consumption. It comes from building a brain that can experience life deeply again. India. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more neuroscience and psychology content. And remember, the quality of your attention determines the quality of your life. See you in the next video.